the philosophy of cooperation, and he argued for a cooperation between the countries of Africa and of the global South to achieve self-reliance together, and even argued that it is not possible to achieve self-reliance in isolation. He also argued for socialist models that are the answer to our context. He argued against a one-size-fits-all socialist organizational model. And he argued for an industrial development that starts from the reality of the agrarian communities that we have in Africa right now, but to seek to reach industrialization by or via agrarian development. And maybe the most important is how he linked the two concepts of development and freedom, that development can only be a true development if it increases the freedoms available to the people, and freedom is also necessary to allow for development to happen. This dialectical relationship between the concepts of development and freedom. Also the fact that we are at a point where the neoliberal model, the market-led model, has shown its failure from all aspects.
واصطح جهور بين الركام عمر حطام هذا المكان يا أيها المخلوق حر حق التغرد زي سراب ينشد تراتيل السلام ولكم شعبا وشعب ما اختاروا حرب الانهزام هل وجد الكوب من عدم علشان يروح يصبح حطام ما كان خيار انقسام ما شالوا نية انتقام فوق المدافع والظلام
ما كانوا بيعملوا كده، بالعكس كانوا بيعاقبوا الناس اللي بتاخذ اللي بتشارك في الاضراب، بتجي انذارات، والناس اللي اترفضوا في اعمالهم، والناس اللي شالوا منهم قروش، والناس حاجات كثيره جدا حصلت للناس. الشركات دي ذاتها حسي عايزين يعملوا فيها اصحابنا، بعد ذلك في ناس متصلين دايرين يجيبوا لنا حاجات ويعلقوا اعلانات، ما مشكله، لكن احنا بنتذكر برضه تعالوا ادعمونا حسي، يعني احنا حسي المنتصرين، ده ما معنى انه نحن حننسى اللي بيقف معانا حقيقه كملوا. لما جينا هنا في القيادة العامة وقفنا هنا، الوقف معانا من الجيش. في البحرية الوقف معانا بنوقف معاك لواء، في لواء وقف معاك بالضبط. في أي حتة بيقفوا معانا الناس التحت. في الشركات بيقفوا معانا الموظفين، في الجيش بيقفوا معانا الضباط التحت، في البيوت بيقفوا معانا الناس التحت اللي عارفيننا. ده اللي احنا تعلمناه في الفترة اللي فاتت دي. أي زول قاعد فوق وزول طلع فوق كيف؟ في زمن الإنقاذ لو ما هو واحد منهم، وفي زول غيرهم بيقدر يعمل قروش ولا بيقدر يبقى رتبة ولا بيقدر يبني بيوت كبيرة.
People took into the streets, barricades were built, strikes took place. The country was in situation of total civil disobedience. This was managed in lack of communication. This was managed basically by the resistance committees, the neighborhood resistance committees, and it still is. The neighborhood resistance committees has issued at first they put out the call for a millions march on the 30th of October, which was yesterday. And prior to that, on the 29th, they've put out their demands, why they're marching against the military.
في مشوار نضالنا اليومي لتحقيق أهداف الثورة وتحقيق الحرية والسلام والعدالة، بنستلهم القوة من شهداء وشهيدات الثورة السودانية، بنستلهم القوة من نضال السودانيات والسودانيين بشكل يومي ومنذ سنوات عشان يقدروا يصلوا للحياة الكريمة، بنستلهم القوة من نضالات الشعوب حول العالم، وبنجدد العهد على إننا حنواصل في طريقنا الثوري نحو تحقيق العدالة الجنائية والاقتصادية والاجتماعية.
Brought down the regime at the end, and we saw that after bringing down the NCP government, the international community again supported the same policies that we were previously protesting against, and they claimed to support us in that. It was their interest in exploiting our resources that took them to that side, basically. And we understood through this experience that a government that oppresses their people or other people cannot in any way be allies to people anywhere else. legitimize compromises with military relations themselves are used to stabilize the world in a form that eases exploitation, regardless of the slogans they use and regardless of how many sustainable development goals they will ever phrase, they will always support our exploitation. Not our liberation by any chance. We also saw that in Sudan, farmers were ripped off their land and their water provide to the projects of Gulf investors that Mohammed mentioned, and that was supported by the military regime in Egypt and in partnership with the corporates of the Zionist occupation in Palestine, and strengthened by the imperial tactics and values of the US and the EU. We saw the militias in Sudan that were funded by the EU, basically to stop immigrants seeking a better life after their lands and resources in Africa were robbed by the same European. International models of oppression and how connected in a very the information and data what we see in front of our eyes is clear enough, and thereby it also clarifies the contradictions between the steps and policies that our countries must implement with its people with decent living on one side, and on the other side between the steps and policies that the counter-revolutionary governments, whether in the region or in the West, must implement to maintain their control over our resources. So this contradiction became very clear in experience over the past 2 years, and it was this shameless display of international systems of oppression that groups who share the interest in a decent living for the masses, and that it can never be an alliance with those who are benefiting from the oppression of our oppression, basically, or of any oppression.
يا بلاد النور وإرهاص الخير، يا بلاد النور وإرهاص الخير، لابد يوم باكر يبقى خير، لابد يوم باكر يبقى خير.
An important thing that we are now mostly getting from social media instead of getting from these large news network with all their huge staffs and huger budgets is how to understand the type of work and organizing that people do on the ground to help themselves in this situation. So to see what kind of setting kitchens or setting shelters, how do people get to do that? Because otherwise, watching the international networks or the news networks, you will imagine that people cease to exist within an area that is under conflict, and they then just appear as corpses and people crying around corpses. But there's a time between until you face that kind of violence, where you are facing different sorts of violences and insecurities regarding food, health, and there are many who are working and creating new methods and new types of organizations, even if they don't call it organizations, that help them provide for each other. And we do see those stories sometimes. So in the case of Sudan, you will find that odd report about the hospital or the doctor, the great doctor that is helping people in this conflict area, but it's always presented as an issue of individualistic heroism. Instead, what it is, which is like create popular organizations and networks that all are needed for the end result to be this doctor to be available. And those are the kind of experiences that we need, one, to show us that we are capable of change. And that is important because despair does not help anyone. And also for us to learn from, because we need them in different setups outside Sudan, Palestine, or other direct violence situations that are happening. And because this also shows us where we can put our support in a way that is sustainable.
رقصت نخلاتك والغابات يا بلاد النور والنيل يتفجر